Good morning, everybody. They were celebrating at the table because we're almost out of numbers. Starting the Book of Deuteronomy today. I know last Friday we didn't have a Bible study. I was traveling and Debbie had agreed to do Bible study for me. She's going to do Bible study for me, by the way, Thursday and Friday of this week while I'm in a training session that starts at 8 a.m. But anyway, I finally think I figured out that we were smack dab in the middle of an update. She couldn't get into it. She called me. I tried. We couldn't get into the Elizabeth Sharon Ann page, which, by the way, I've changed my page name from Elizabeth Inman Public to Elizabeth Sharon Ann. I'll talk about that in a second. But we couldn't get into the live. There was no live button. We could get in there. We were on the page, but there was no live button. There wasn't one on her end, and she's down there in Blanchard, Oklahoma, and I was in Kansas, and there was no live button. So not anything we could do, but throughout the morning, different times I tried to log in there, and eventually it asked me 2 or 3 questions, just popped up with some questions, and I had to answer them. And then after I hit the answer to the last one and submitted, it just popped up and there was the live button. So I'm pretty sure that I was in the middle of an update. I probably logged in, or we logged in, just as an update was taking place. At least that's the only thing I can figure out. Technology and I are just best friends. I just love technology. It lets us do these things. Speaking of technology, I have made a little change the name Elizabeth Inman Public to Elizabeth Sharon Ann. That's my first name, my 2 middle names that my mama gave me when I was born, that the good Lord thought of before he laid the foundation of the earth, by the way. But I'm writing some books. I'm writing some books for the ministry, and I'm writing some books for business. And so as I'm working with my publishers, we were talking about what happens when people try to find Elizabeth Inman. And I'm a long ways from ending my second career. I'm on my second career. I'm a business owner and own Inman Financial and Christ-centered counseling, and I have a women's ministry. So to separate those, we decided that my ministry name, I'll use Elizabeth Sharon Ann, and for business, I'll continue with Elizabeth Inman. And so that's the reason for that. But if you will help me spread the Elizabeth Sharon Ann page, that's where we grow the Bible study. That's where I do the Bible study. And I have a book coming out, probably should be out of publishing in a couple of months, I think. And then not too long after that, I'll have another book coming out on the business, I suppose. So things are happening. God's good, and we're wanting to get the word out and wanting people to be encouraged to do the Bible study every single day, reading all the way through the Bible. We're on day 82. Looky there. Look at how much we've already read this year. My goodness, the time goes fast. As they said at the table this morning, we're going to be finishing up Numbers this morning, and the Old Testament reading will be Numbers chapter 36, which will end the Numbers. And then we move into Deuteronomy, the first chapter. I've always loved Deuteronomy. I enjoyed Numbers this time. I probably wrote more notes, God bless you, in my column this time than probably all the times combined. But that's how God's word is. God's word is a seed. He refers to it as a seed, that as we're reading, seeds are being planted in our heart, and it takes time, and then there's a harvest from that. There's scriptures that tell us that this word will never return void, that if we're reading, even the things that is not fun for us to read, the things maybe we're not understanding at the time, a work is being done in us. The harvest, the time it takes to water and fertilize the seeds is taking place in our life, and there will be a harvest. You know, I didn't know it, but when I started this Bible reading plan, I don't know, 18, 19, 20 years ago, however long ago it was, couldn't be 20 years ago, probably 19 years ago, I had no idea that one of these days I would actually enjoy reading the book of Numbers, because quite frankly, back then, I hated it back then. And I do mean literally, I dreaded it. You know, you guys have heard me talk about the book of Leviticus, that for years I would argue with the Lord. Now, just why do I have to read about all those sacrifices and all those traditional offerings that was made, and how they made a pleasing aroma to the Lord? And when you ask, get ready for the answer. Because God powerfully gave me the answer to that question for Leviticus. And so anyway, getting ready to read Deuteronomy. Just again, these Bible studies are to encourage you to read. Don't beat yourself up. Don't make it a religious tradition. You have to read it. When you reach that place, when it's a struggle for you, ask God to put the desire back into your heart. I've prayed that prayer so many times. Lord, I know you've got a message for me today, this day. Give me a desire to read, and help me to read this spiritually, Lord, so I get what you have for me today. So anyway, with that, let's dig into Deuteronomy, because I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning this morning, and I've spent hours in the Word this morning, and it was great. So lots of information on Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy means second law. So Moses, when he was at Mount Zion and Mount Sinai, I always do that, Mount Sinai, and God was giving him the 10 Commandments. At that point in time, Moses gave the Israelites the law. God gave Moses the law for the Israelites. Say it right. It came from God. Moses is the one that spoke it. And then the backdrop for today is Deuteronomy takes us back again to the other side of the Jordan. So the Israelites are with Moses on this side of the Jordan, and when they look across the Jordan, they see the promised land. And so as we're reading the book of Deuteronomy, I want you to think about kind of the same way I feel about the book of John. The book of John, to me, starting in about chapter 13, 14, long in there, is Jesus's last words to the disciples. Jesus was preparing them. The Bible says he told them over and over again, they're going to arrest me, they're going to crucify me, they're going to kill me, and 3 days later I'll rise again. And yet when it happened, when the very thing he'd been telling them happened, what happened? Well, one of them took out the sword and cut off the soldier's ear trying to stop it, even though Jesus had been telling them that this would fulfill the scriptures. Well, this is really a type and shadow in a way, in that Moses is telling them, I've got a stray hair, keeps falling down my forehead, into my eyes. Moses keeps telling them about crossing over to the promised land, and Moses already knows he's not going to go over to the promised land. Joshua is the one, and Joshua's name even implies Jesus. If you look up the meaning to Joshua, oh, I'm telling you, it's laying right on my face. And we're live on Facebook and recorded on YouTube. The other day I said something about being live on Facebook, but I didn't mention that we film for YouTube, and I had somebody say, you're live on YouTube? Because we're working to be live on YouTube. I've asked for 1,000 people to subscribe to my channel, which also is going to be called Elizabeth Sharon Ann. By the way, I've made that change on YouTube as well, to subscribe to the Elizabeth Sharon Ann channel so that we can go live again on YouTube. But I haven't got there yet. We've made lots of progress towards that. Anyway, fighting this little hair on my face live today. So it's a type and shadow. Moses has been with these people for over 40 years. I mean, they've been through some times together. If you go back to their parents being freed from slavery and all of the miracles that it took for Pharaoh to let the people go from slavery into the wilderness, and miracle after miracle, God appearing to them in a cloud and going before them in this cloud and showing them where to camp, where to set up camp, when to take down camp. And then at night, he appeared to them in a fire and everything in between. And now he knows his time is short. I mean, it's no different than us on our deathbed knowing that our time is near and the final words we want to say to those that we love. You know, gather the kids around, the grandkids around, all those people that you love so much. And what would you want to say? That's what we're reading here. He's reiterating to them the second law. This is the 5th book of the Jewish Torah. It's also called the Words of Moses. That's another nickname that they have for this particular book. Chapters 1 through 30 are 3 sermons that Moses gives him. Once again, final words before Moses is going to die. The first sermon talks about the first sermon that he gives them actually recounts the 40 years in the desert. He reminds them of all they've gone through, all they've seen, all they've experienced while they're in the desert. And then the second one is the commandment and the command for their need to follow God. That Moses is telling them, you know, choose life. This is one of the books of the Bible that talks about life and death. And Moses tells them that God sets before you this day life and death. And then he gives them the answer, choose life. So it's Moses commanding them to be sure and follow God and to obey him. And then the 3rd chapter is all about comfort and comforting them and telling them that they have a God that will redeem them and that he'll always love them. So chapters 31 to 34 are considered the songs of Moses. The first one, first section of that is the blessings of Moses, where he speaks blessings over them. And then the next set is when he's passing the mantle on to Joshua, and then it ends up with the death of Moses on Mount Nebo. So this chapter of Deuteronomy stresses the uniqueness of God, how unique God is. And here they are on the far side of the Jordan looking across, and as I mentioned, they can see the promised land. And when they see the promised land, they're getting a glimpse of the uniqueness of God. And then Moses pours his heart out to them, really, really, really wants them to get it. I can't even imagine how he was feeling. And then keep in mind, too, that as we move through the New Testament, there's especially the part where Jesus was led by the Holy Spirit into the desert. When the enemy comes to him and tries to tempt him, 3 different times Jesus quotes the book of Deuteronomy. I looked up some commentary, and it said that Jesus actually meditated a lot on the book of Deuteronomy. They called it precious to him, that the book of Deuteronomy was precious to Jesus. So, you know, if it was considered precious to Jesus, perhaps it ought to be precious to us as well. But he quoted it 3 times. He quoted Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 13, Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 16, and Deuteronomy 8, verse 3, when he was being tempted in the desert. And then the book of Deuteronomy influences the book of Deuteronomy, as I mentioned, it is the 5th book of the Jewish Torah, but the book of Deuteronomy has, of all the books in the Bible, has the most influence on many modern day religions that aren't even Christian, they use as a foundation the Book of Deuteronomy way more than any of the other books do, and I found that very interesting as well. And it's a story of a generation of unbelievers. They were known as the unbelievers. And then had the new generation. So the parents were the unbelievers. They didn't even get to cross over to the promised land. And then the new generation, which was their children that are standing on that other side of the Jordan looking over, become known as the believers. But remember, even then, some of them chose to stay on that side of the Jordan instead of going over. I'm still fascinated by that they would rather stay where they're at than to enter into the promised land. So anyway, a little bit of background as we start Deuteronomy. Lots of things that I highlighted in here today. It starts right off chapter 1, verse 1. These are the words that Moses spoke to all the people of Israel while they were in the wilderness east of the Jordan River. And then something extremely interesting that I'd not ever found before, but we skipped down to verse 6 in Deuteronomy chapter 1. When we were at Mount Sinai, the Lord our God said to us, "You've stayed at this mountain long enough." Now, I'm always looking for tidbits. That little phrase right there, for many years, has been a little tidbit for me. It's almost like God saying, Elizabeth, it's time to move on. Stop dwelling on that. Stop going around this mountain over and over and over again. You've stayed at this mountain long enough. I'm listening to a teacher this morning that quoted Albert Einstein that says the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, but expecting a different outcome. You've stayed at this mountain long enough. It is time to break camp and move on. Go to the hill country, the Amorites, and to all the neighboring regions, the Jordan Valley and the hill country, the western foothills, the Negev and the coastal plain. Go to the land of the Canaanites and to Lebanon, and all the way to the great Euphrates River. And then verse 8, look, I am giving all this land to you. Go in and occupy it, for it is the land the Lord swore to give to your ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and to all their descendants. Verse 10, the Lord your God has increased your population, making you as numerous as the stars. And then it goes on in verse 12, but you are such a heavy load to carry, Moses tells them. How can I deal with all your problems and bickering? I can't even imagine. I've got a phone call coming in. For a moment, I thought it was my dad calling back in. But then down to verse 21. Look, he has placed the land in front of you. Go and occupy it, as the Lord, the God of your ancestors, has promised you. Don't be afraid. Don't be discouraged. See, life is about change. Life is about moving forward. I've done some studies with some folks that operate on the principle that happiness it's impossible to feel happiness if you're not making progress in your life, if you're not moving forward. God didn't create us to be static, to stand still. He created us to be in a constant metamorphosis of change, to be in a constant metamorphosis of progress, of moving forward. And if you stop right now and just reflect in your own life, those times when you felt like, man, time just stands still, nothing's happening. COVID has done that to people. There's been people that's been sick longer with COVID than they have been any other time. The quarantines, you're not sick, but you've been exposed. You're forced into a 14-day quarantine period of time. And during that period of time, we start getting restless and we start getting antsy. And we want to break out, we want to break free. It's because we're not making progress. We don't feel as though we're making progress when we're tied down. And God is telling us through these scriptures today to go and occupy, it. Occupy what it is that God's leading you to. God is taking you to a new level. He's taking you to a new place. It's not meant for you to stay static. Even if it's just in your revelation of Him, in the transforming of your mind, allow Him to do that. And He tells us, don't be afraid, don't be discouraged. But you all came to me. Now, this is the part where I really wanted to make, this is the part, I had never seen this before. But you all came to me and said, first, let's send scouts out to explore the land for us. Now, I went back and looked in Numbers chapter 13, verse 2. And Numbers 13, verse 2 says, and the Lord said to Moses, send 12 scouts out. So because of that, in my mind, it had always been that God told him to go scout out the land. And I can remember this year reading that for the first time ever. Inside of me, it was their unbelief. I had that thought. It was their unbelief about the promised land being as good as they thought it was that caused them to send scouts out. But then I read Numbers 13 too. In fact, I went back and reread it on the day that we were reading that. And it said, the Lord said, send 12 out. And so I passed it off. No, God told them to send the scouts out. But then I read this today, verse 22. But you all came to me, Moses said, and told me, first let's send our scouts to explore the land for us. They will advise us on the best route to take and which towns we should enter. And so I, again, got up really early this morning. I had lots of time. So I pulled up some commentaries, and what the commentaries say about those two scriptures here in Deuteronomy and contrasting it to Numbers 13, chapter 2, is that in Numbers, it was God's response to Moses telling him they wanted to send scouts out. So when God saw that they were intent on sending scouts out, He told them then to send one from each tribe. In fact, one of the commentaries said that God specifically told them to send one from every tribe, which would number 12, so that there would be at least two that really would see the promise and really would see what God wanted to see. Because once again, God knows all. God's not surprised. There's not anything we can do that surprises God. There isn't anything they did that surprised God. And so Numbers 13:2 was God's way of making sure that a proper report came back, because He knew 10 of them would come back with the wrong report. This seemed like such a good idea to me, Moses said, so I chose 12 scouts, one from each of your tribes. They headed for the hill country and came to the valley of Eshcol and explored it. They picked up some of its fruit and brought it back to us, and they reported, this land the Lord our God has given us is indeed a good land. If they just stopped right there. The promised land that God promised to give us, the land flowing with milk and honey, is indeed a good land. But you have rebelled against the command of the Lord your God and refused to go in. You complained in your tents and said, the Lord must hate us. The Lord must hate us. Now, keep in mind the tone in which Moses is saying this to everybody. This had to be a haunting memory for him. This is when he gets denied the ability to go over to the promised land as well. And he's telling them it's all because of your complaining. You know, he starts off, remember, saying back in verse 12, but you're such a heavy load to carry. How can I deal with all your problems and your bickering? He's telling them, you guys, your numbers got so big it become hard for me to manage. How can I carry this heavy load? And do you remember when? Do you remember when you came to me and said, let's send scouts over? And then you came back and you said, oh yeah, it is a good land. But then you rebelled against the command of the Lord your God, and you refused to go in, and you complained. And this is what they said. The Lord must hate us. How many times have you heard me say that every problem I've ever had in my entire life can be traced back to my inability to truly understand and comprehend how much God loves us, how much God loves me? I'll make it personal. Every problem I've ever had. But I'm venturing out because of what I read in God's word, that it's the same for all of us. All of our problems can be traced back to our inability to truly believe how much God loves us. How easy is it for us right here today on March the 23rd of 2021 to read this story and think, what idiots. I mean, they could see it. They even brought back fruit that was bigger than anything. The grapes, it took 2 men to carry the grapes. They were so heavy. How come they wouldn't go? Why did all they do is complain? Why did they say the Lord must hate us? When we're all guilty of that. We're all guilty of just not trusting. They found it so hard to trust God that they didn't believe that He loved them enough to take care of them when they encountered the giants on the other side. What will it take for us to finally believe that God loves us enough to take care of us as He pushes us forward, as He moves us forward into progress, as change continues to happen in our world, in the world? Change is inevitable. It's always going to happen. And He tells us over and over. I've heard it said that He tells us, fear not, 365 times. I've never read it myself. I've never looked it up myself. But for sure, He tells us over, even in today's reading, don't be afraid. Don't be discouraged. Don't be afraid of what's going on in your life right now. Don't be discouraged. When you find areas that you're having trouble trusting God in, ask Him why. Ask Him what the root of that is. Where does that come from? You know, I had a conversation with a wonderful person just in the last few days. And we talked about situations right now today. Very successful person. Somebody that is very successful, and yet as change is coming up in their life, they're hesitant, and they even self-sabotage to a degree because they just don't understand why they can't move forward the way they're wanting to move forward. And we talked about their past, about how many times they've been hurt and how many times they've been betrayed and how many times they've had trauma in their life, and how important it is to go back on their timeline to the root cause of that mistrust, of not being able to believe that God's really going to take care of us. And go back to the root and to that incident under the power of the Holy Spirit. One of the best times to do that is right after a Bible reading, is to go, okay, Lord, show me the root of this going on in my life. Show it to me and expose it to the light, to His light, so He can heal it. But see, we want to keep it hidden away in our heart. We find these little chambers in our heart. And I'm using a sanctified imagination here to describe this, but something really, really bad happens. We get our heart broken. We have a horrible thing happen in our life, and we go to our heart and we open up this little chamber and we stuff it in there, and we stuff it in, and we close the door and we turn the key and we lock it and we throw away the key, and we think because we've hidden that deep inside of our heart that it'll never resurface again. And then here we are out here doing life, and something wonderful is before us, and we're ready to walk into that, and then something stops us and we sabotage it. You know, we reject people before they reject us. So that person leaves, and you can say, oh, yep, that's the pattern. Everybody in my life's left me. Every person who ever professed to love me has left me, when we're the one that self-sabotaged it. That's what we see here. We see it happening. And God gives us the formula, His love. The formula, which is His love. See, it all begins and ends with love. We learn not to trust people not to hurt us, but we learn to trust that God will be there with us even though they hurt us. And that his ways are so much better than our ways. And that as we learn to trust him, our life is so much richer and so much fuller because we get to enter into the promised land. As we open ourselves up and make ourselves vulnerable to him, then we get to enter into the promised land right here on earth. They did not believe that God loved them enough to take care of the giants that was in front of them. And it says right here that God goes before us. He goes before us. Verse 29, but I said to you, don't be shocked or afraid of them. The Lord your God is going ahead of you. I'm saying that to you today. God goes ahead of you everywhere you go. There's other verses in here that'll say that he'll send his angels before you everywhere you go. We're learning to trust him through reading these Old Testament scriptures. We're learning that he is trustworthy, that he is a God of love, and that he does love us enough. Luke chapter 5, verse 29 through chapter 6, verse 11 is story after story after story. Jesus is revealing himself to the people around him, and he's revealing himself to us today. He's pointing out our prejudices, our biases. He's pointing out our judgmental nature to us in today's reading. Oh, he's over there having lunch with them. He's eating with them. Oh man. Oh, did you hear what they did? That church group over there. Do you know what they did? Well, I heard about that sect in town, that cult in town, and they're over there doing that. And you can see yourself in these scriptures if you allow God to show you. And Jesus' own words, healthy people don't need a doctor, sick people do. I've come to call not those who think they are righteous, but those who know they are sinners and need to repent. He shows us who he is in these words. Psalm 66, verse 16, come and listen, all you who fear God, and I will tell you what he did for me. For I cried out to him for help, praising him as I spoke. Verse 19, but God did listen. He paid attention to my prayer. Do I need to point out to you one more time? One more time? Why I believe God hears every prayer I pray. Every prayer you pray, it's over and over and over again in the scriptures. But God did listen. He paid attention to my prayer. Even when it doesn't seem like he's hearing you, he hears every prayer you pray. And we'll end with Proverbs 11, verse 24 and 26. Give freely. Oh, there's that word again. Give. Give. Give freely and become more wealthy. That's contrary to what everybody teaches. It's contrary to our culture. It's contrary to what the world teaches. Give freely and become more wealthy. We don't give to get. He's talking about a natural law that happens, that when out of love, out of our heart, we give, the wealth comes. Be stingy and lose everything. Be stingy and lose everything. Oh, you mean I got to give a tenth? I got to give a tenth to the church? Nope. You don't have to. But give freely and become wealthy. Be stingy and lose everything. The generous will prosper. Oh, there's more. The generous will prosper. If you don't have a place to give, Elizabeth Inman Ministries, P.O. Box 1149, Skytook, Oklahoma 74070. Our next big project is we're going to do a Dream Big retreat for special needs adults. You give to this ministry and you give to things like that. We keep Bibles on hand and we give away dozens of Bibles because you give to this ministry. The generous will prosper. Those who refresh others will themselves be refreshed. When's the last time you gave somebody a compliment? When's the last time you pointed out something that somebody has done well? People curse those who hoard their grain, but they bless the one who sells in time of need. There's more nuggets in today's reading than I can point out to you. I didn't even go over all my notes. It was a great day of reading. I hope you guys enjoyed it on this terrific Tuesday. We'll be back again tomorrow. Remember, Debbie will be doing Bible study for us on Thursday and Friday. I sure appreciate her filling in for me. God bless you guys.